Welcome to The Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, you can't call it a war on drugs because wars end. This is Savages. Welcome to The Blast Zone.
Welcome to The Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I am Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like Savages, which we'll be talking about today. But before we get into that, Ian, how are you doing this week?
This week, I had my second dentist appointment in ages, the other half of my deep cleaning that I've talked about on last episode. And I also took my first brisk walk in ages. And let me just say, both of them were extremely strenuous. I'm not in good shape, people.
Dental cleaning scare me far more than brisk walks, but I hear you. Any physical labor is particularly taxing at this stage of our lives. But I assume you guys are having great weather out there on the West Coast.
We've got fall weather, so it's actually cool, so I can actually take a walk and not be drenched in sweat, which is nice. That's a perk.
You have fall weather. We do not. It was 75 degrees today, and it will be tomorrow and Sunday as well.
Ooh, nice.
Is it though?
Isn't that a good thing?
But also our pumpkin rotted like immediately. We carved a fucking face and he's like, what are you doing, man? It's 73 degrees outside. And we were just trying to get in the spooky Halloween spirit, but it was not to be done this year. Now it's just melting on my porch. It's pretty sad. But yeah, I think we should at least quickly address what's going on the platform on which we met. A lot of big Twitter news this week.
But it's not real. Is it real?
It feels pretty real.
Owns the platform and he's driving it into the ground like he's on a Tesla autopilot.
Advertisers just fleeing the site in droves and bot accounts actually increasing, I think I saw. It's very sad because we have a little community on Twitter that we enjoy. That's how we met. We have met in person since then. So we're not just like Twitter friends exclusively, but it feels like a pretty big part of our lives that's at risk of disappearing, or if not disappearing, then certainly not being what it has.
Yeah, it'll be sad if it goes down the tubes and we can't use it for what we use it for. Now, a lot of people use it for different things. We have a neat little community on there that hangs out and makes jokes, and it's pretty fun apart from the hellishness that you have to wade through. I just hope the hellishness doesn't take over and drive all the fun out.
Yeah, so that's been a damper on the week. But aside from that, we had a fun Halloween at my house. We got a lot of candy, went trick-or-treating, took my kids around the neighborhood. It was a good time. They're still working through their treasures that they obtained that evening.
Oh, lucky.
I've been dipping into the stash a little bit as well, but don't tell them. If they listen back to this in many years when they're into podcasts, I don't want them to find out my dirty secret that I steal their candy when they go to bed at night.
Where did my full-size Reese's go?
We were the full-size house, by the way. There was two in our block, but we were one of the two. We went to Costco and got the full-size candy bars, and that was like a dream come true for me. I always wanted to be the house with the full-size candy bars.
That's very cool of you to do that. Cements your place amongst the neighborhood kids.
But now we have to do it every year, right? Like you can't go back to the way things were. You can't start getting fun size next year. There's going to be an expectation. So we really kind of locked ourselves in. And we don't plan on moving anytime soon. So we're going to have a substantial candy budget for the next few years.
You need to start one of those tax-free candy savings accounts so you can save up during the year.
See if my FSA will cover it. But enough about Halloween and candy. Ian, what if you watched recently? I know we just recovered from Blasttober, so I assume you haven't watched anything spooky and or scary this week.
Well, I did. I got stuck in Spooktober mode, extending my Blasttober, which was really fun for us. So I snuck in this double feature that's kind of thematic. I didn't realize it. I checked out Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities, which is brand new on Netflix, which came out for Halloween. It's this fun anthology show, and it's just what you think it's going to be. It's like a bunch of spooky short stories. It's got a very familiar Twilight Zone meets Creepshow kind of vibe, meaning that the stories are these short little morality plays. They're in this pulpy style. There's excess garish gruesomeness to them that pleases the genre fans. But unfortunately, like after a couple of them, I was like, the stories are kind of too obvious. It's too easy to see the endings coming, and they seem like they were just there to play out the gore and a pretty heavy-handed moral lesson. Our guy, David Pryor, who we just talked about in the Empty Man episode, he did episode 3 of Cabinet of Curiosities. His episode was better than the first two. It had a little more mystery. It had a little more fresh style. But in the end, I was like, it's not that much better. So I was kind of like lukewarm on the whole thing. And then coincidentally, Netflix teased Ballad of Buster Scruggs to me me, which I'd watched before and liked. Coen Brothers movie from 2018, if anyone doesn't know it. I went in for a rewatch and I'm like, oh shit, it's the same thing. It's an anthology of short stories, genre stories, right? This is Western instead of horror, but they're very like genre tropey. It's got familiar settings. It's got pulpy, over-the-top violence, just like Guillermo del Toro threw in there. The difference was the writing is so much better. Now, they got nominated for an Oscar for the writing, and I don't think Cabinet is going to get those kind of nominations. But the morality themes in these stories were a strong thread of the stories, but they were more ambiguous and they were more difficult to pull apart. And so I guess that feels truer to human experience. Like, okay, that made me think, but I don't know what I think. And that's left me with a better feeling.
Now, does our boy Guillermo get in the director's chair for any of these, or is he just kind of the shepherd of the production?
Yeah, not that I know of. I think he's all doing it to promote other directors. And so he does a little stand up in front of the camera at the beginning. He's pretty awkward with that.
That's funny.
It's charming at least. And
that's Hitchcockian, though.
He tries to do the Rod Serling, Alfred Hitchcock kind of thing and introduce the bit and calls out the director. So it's cool. Like he's doing his part to advance the stuff that he's into. I think it would be cool if he did one.
We had a little bit of an interesting conversation about Guillermo's career. And I think we kind of came to an agreement that for his immense like cultural footprint on the film industry, he's got one great movie, right? He's got a lot of good movies, but I think we both agree Pan's Labyrinth is his only movie we would really say is unassailable, right?
He's hit and miss. I like Shape of Water.
Nightmare Alley was boring.
Nightmare Alley, I lost interest, which was sad because it had so many cool people and it was such a cool vibe.
Yeah, it was like a carnival noir. I'm all about it in theory. But then look at his filmography. I was not a Shape of Water fan. I love Pan's Labyrinth. Okay. I really like Hellboy 2. I mentioned that. I think that's probably his second best movie, which is, I don't think that's a very popular idea, but I find it's more of a companion piece to Pan's Labyrinth than it is to Hellboy, if that makes sense. The Devil's Backbone is good. Mimic is really cool. Blade 2 is really cool. The first Hellboy's fun. Pacific Rim is a good time, but none of these are absolute blow you away masterpieces.
Everybody loves his intentions and he's just a positive force. So it's great to have him continue to succeed and do things, but they're not all amazing.
Shifting gears to not all amazing, I watched a movie that was also not amazing. I watched Don't Worry Darling, which I'm like 2 months too late to the discourse to really weigh in on all of that. But I think it was a Vulture writer who said in their review that it is neither as bad as you hoped or as good as you hoped. It's not an embarrassment. It's not some kind of huge disaster. It's not a mess. It's a pretty competently made movie with some interesting ideas that maybe aren't fleshed out enough, or they're maybe telegraphed a bit too much. I would certainly say the movie kind of hinges on a twist and it doesn't do a good job of kind of keeping it a mystery for long. You start catching on pretty early. I will say Florence Pugh, fantastic actor. Chris Pine, really good in this. And they have a few scenes where they face off that are really entertaining. Harry Styles, not sure he's an actor at heart. I don't quite think he has it. He could not really pull off the more dramatic scenes. And I know he just made another high concept drama called My Policeman, which is available for streaming. So I'm planning to check that out and see if maybe he was just a little flustered being surrounded by such a powerhouse cast. But yeah, he's pretty not good in this movie.
Wow. Okay. I started it and I saw that it was much more conceptual than I realized because I didn't know anything about it. I was like, I got to come back to this because I didn't have the mind space when I flipped it on. It didn't seem like just a breezy watch. I needed to focus on what the heck was going on.
It's got a lot to say. It's pretty timely, I guess, considering what's going on in our society. I hate using that word. But there's a lot of parallels to current popular figures in the podcasting space or in the YouTube video space. Let's say male influencers who are maybe controversial for very appropriate reasons. There's some applicability to what's going on today. And this movie's been in the works for a few years. It's not like this is a new phenomenon, but it feels like it's really ramped up recently. So it came out at kind of an interesting time. And I think it did a good bit of business. I liked Olivia Wilde's first movie, Booksmart, very much. And this movie does not do anything to make me feel like she's not a good director. Maybe it's just a bad match of material and director. So I'm still going to tune in for her next movie.
I didn't make heads or tails of the whole internet drama that went on about the filmmakers and the cast of this movie. So I'm like, I don't have anything to take away from that. And I don't have any reason to dislike Olivia Wilde. So I'm going to check her out next time too.
So on to Savages. Ian, what did you know about Savages coming into this? I know you mentioned you had watched it once before. I don't know how long ago. What was your journey with this movie?
So I tried to think back. I can't remember back past March of 2021 when we started this podcast by watching John Carter. And that's, I think, when you clued me into this movie because I was like, who's Taylor Kitsch and what do I need to know about him? And I watched it then in the run up to recording our first podcast episode. And I'm pretty sure that was the first time I watched it. I think the poster images were familiar to me, the glamorous plus spooky Day of the Dead images that made up the various poster and streaming box cover art. Before that, I didn't really know, but I liked it the first time I watched it over a year ago. And then I liked it okay now, but I think maybe I'm cooling off to this movie. I have to talk through that.
Yeah, I agree. I had fond memories of seeing this movie, not in theaters, but relatively soon after it was available at home. I own the Blu-ray somewhere and And I was a Don Winslow fan. We've discussed Don Winslow a little bit, the author who wrote the book Savages, which I've also read. But I first discovered Don Winslow with his Mexican cartel drama, The Power of the Dog. Unfortunately named because now it's much harder to Google.
Right.
Because all you get is Benedict Cumberbatch movies.
Yes.
He's been an author I've really enjoyed. We both are fans of like crime fiction, and that's kind of his wheelhouse. He's covered crime fiction in the Italian mafia, crime fiction in Hell's Kitchen, crime fiction in the Mexican cartels. He's like, if someone's out there doing crime, I'm going to write about it. And that's very appealing to me. So yeah, I was on board for this movie. I'm not a big Oliver Stone fan, and I'll get into why as we go. But this, in a lot of ways, this doesn't really feel like an Oliver Stone movie. It's almost like workman-like direction from him.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
There are some like flourishes that you could attribute to him, but more or less, it's a pretty straightforward filmmaking style he used in this. It's far cry from the hyper stylized stuff of like Natural Born Killers or JFK.
I don't know how much credit you give Oliver Stone, but the movie has stuff that you expect to see in a Mexican drug cartel crime movie, which is some flashy moments of oversaturated color and jerky motion and silhouettes and things. But like those are tropes of action crimey movies these days. And maybe those are his version of all those things. But they're just kind of inserted in this movie in an obligatory kind of way to get you through from A to Z. None of it's super inspired.
Yeah, parts of this movie felt like he was almost aping early 2000s, mid 2000s Tony Scott. I got a lot of Man on Fire vibes from this movie, or even pick any Tony Scott and Denzel movie from the 2000s. Deja Vu was Out of Time. Out of Time wasn't Tony Scott, but it might as well have been. I got a lot of those vibes. So I see what you're saying. Man on Fire, especially, is a movie about the cartel. Clearly heavily inspired his filmmaking style and Savages. But do you want to get into a little bit of the making of the movie and kind of the background?
Yeah, let's hear how this thing happened.
All right. Don Winslow, no relation to Carl, was an established and acclaimed crime fiction author by 2010. His Neil Carey series, the first installment of which was published in 1991, was a hit, but he would eventually come to be best known for his books about the Mexican drug war, the first of which was published in 2005 and was unfortunately called The Power of the Dog, making it pretty hard to Google now. He'd write some other books between 2005 and 2010, but he would revisit the cartels with 2010's Savages, about a couple of SoCal slackers who get in over their head when their burgeoning weed business attracts the attention of a ruthless crime syndicate south of the border.
That's some heavy shit, man.
Before Winslow was even done writing Savages, Oliver Stone had secured the rights to adapt the novel into a film, even providing some of the financing for the movie out of his own pocket. Beleaguered production house Relativity Media was the production company overseeing the film and secured a $45 million budget. Universal Pictures was brought in to distribute, their first time distributing an Oliver Stone film. Stone cast Taylor Kitsch as the lead after being impressed by early footage Peter Berg showed him of Battleship.
Hey, you sank my casting call.
Which tells you all you need to know about Oliver Stone's eye for quality, and Aaron Taylor Johnson and Jennifer Lawrence as the other two leads. Lawrence would drop out of the film due to scheduling conflicts with the Hunger Games, and a number of actresses were considered to replace her, with Blake Lively ultimately being chosen. John Travolta was brought in to play a corrupt DEA agent, and Salma Hayek, Damian Bashir, and Benicio del Toro rounded out the cartel side of the cast. Filmed in various locations around Los Angeles from July 6th to September 30th of 2011, including some scenes filmed in Indonesia. And holy shit, I can't believe they went to Indonesia to film like one super short scene that takes place on a beach. They have lots of beaches in Southern California.
Anyway,
the film was originally scheduled for a fall 2012 release, but was moved up to summer blockbuster territory after the studio was impressed by an early print. With a new release date of July 6, 2012 secured, a release date which they shared with The Amazing Spider-Man, it was clear the studio had high hopes for Savages. Unfortunately, the reviews were firmly mediocre, as the movie sits at a, cue up the Thanos voice, perfectly balanced, 50% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
It opened in fourth place with $16 million, certainly respectable, but overshadowed by Spider-Man and Seth MacFarlane teddy bear comedy Ted. It had a decent return in its second week, only dropping 41% for $9 million, but then in its third week, The Dark Knight Rises released and blew Savages out of the water. Who picked this release date? I would like to tell you the movie went on to have a rabid cult following in the years since, but that would be a filthy lie. It's mostly forgotten, except as the last semi-competent film performance Jon Travolta has given. And there you have it.
We kind of just speculate about the release date. Should this movie have done better? Do movies in this genre do better? Is that why they thought they could just cue it up like, oh yeah, we've got a cartel crime movie with a hot young cast and a weird relationship angle to it, like I hesitate to say sex angle to it, but it does have a sex angle. Like they show a lot of sex. And
it's not just sex. It's truly a throuple, which wasn't as prevalent an idea, I guess, in 2012 as it is now.
Yes, so you'll hear the two of us will try to be respectful to the concept in this movie, which is this polyamorous relationship, which we now more casually understand and talk about, at least in our social circle, yours and mine. You're right, it probably was more strange to see. But the movie, aside from the fact that it treats that part seriously, it does cast these three young, sexy leads, and they mostly take off their clothes and they have some scenes where they have sex 2 or 3 at a time. And that's part of the appeal of the movie, is that there's skin in it, you know, we milk it.
It's a bit lurid with its eyes towards sex. And there's also this kind of, it's hard to tell, but I'm pretty sure he hates at least Ben and Ophelia. Oliver Stone doesn't like these characters, is the vibe I got from them. I think he identifies most closely with Jon, which is its own problem, but Ben's considered kind of a weakling, a little helpless guy who's an idealist and just wants to save the world, but he's kind of like stereotypical. He's a white guy with dreadlocks for a portion of the movie. He doesn't keep them for the whole movie, thankfully. And Ophelia is just like, she's kidnapped by a Mexican cartel and she's like, I want a salad. There seems to be he's a little mean-spirited with these characters at times, which adds another layer to it. It's like, are they just beautiful idiots to you?
I wonder, but we have to psychoanalyze Oliver Stone then, because like to us, that seems like he's insulting them, but he may be playing them really straight and he may think that that's just how they are and that's totally cool.
Is that better or worse though? That's just how he thinks that these people are. I don't know. I don't know if that's an improvement. Either way, he's got like a real boomery outlook on a lot of the stuff in this movie.
We'll get into it when we start to talk about specifically the characters too. But yeah, they are kind of cookie cutter, even though they're different in these weird ways. Like we said, seeing the throuple on screen is different, but they do fall into a lot of stereotypes, which is okay, I guess, for a genre movie. It's like, yeah, we want to see cartels. Like cartel people are going to be stereotypes. Just the fact that they're picking up chainsaws in warehouses and making videos of disfiguring people, all that stuff. I don't know. In a genre movie, to some extent, you can just let it ride and enjoy that stuff, but none of it's that enjoyable, I think is going to be our conclusion when we get through to the end of this thing.
Yeah, and I feel like you can't even say that Jon and Ben are like fully fleshed out characters because they each feel like half a character. They don't go on like a journey. Well, Ben goes on more of a journey because he's forced to do things he's uncomfortable with, but Jon really doesn't change at all through the whole story. He's a violent pessimist in the beginning and he's a violent pessimist at the end.
Oh yeah, the only way you could say he changed is that he didn't run away at the end. It seems like he's still hanging out with them. In the beginning, he threatens like, if we go to Indonesia, I can stand it for like 3 months and then I'm out of there. And then there's some suggestion at the end that like maybe the three of them did stay together and he didn't bail.
I wouldn't say it's suggestion. I think it's pretty much outright confirmed that unless it's, well, the ending's fucking weird. We can kind of get to talk about that a little more when we get there.
Yeah.
It's presented in a very strange way that I strongly disagree with. But
it is.
Throughout the whole movie, Jon is the Taylor Kitsch character. We should get into the storyline relatively soon, but he's just like, we got to kill all these fucking guys. And everyone's like, no, we shouldn't do that. We can solve this without violence. And then they end up solving it all with violence anyway, which is not great, but maybe kind of Oliver Stoney.
And it would be tragic and ironic and meaningful if the good guy, the guy that you associate with, right, which is Ben, which is the nice one, the intellectual one, the one who's trying to help the world, if he was proved wrong, if he was corrupted by it all in the end, and it ended kind of tragically, and it almost ends tragically, and we'll get to that, but it doesn't. It flips it on you, and it's like, actually, everything's cool.
One of the most bizarre cop-outs I can remember in a movie for the ending is the ending of this movie. It fucking sucks. But why don't you want to get into the story just so we can get there and complain about it?
Yeah, here we go. Ben and Jon are best friends who grow primo weed and run a thriving drug business in Southern California. Jon, played by Taylor Kitsch, is a belligerent ex-soldier, and Ben, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, is a philanthropic botanist. They're in a polyamorous relationship with a woman named Ophelia, who they call O, played by Blake Lively, who loves both men equally. Down in Mexico, the Baja drug cartel, led by Elena Sanchez, played by Salma Hayek, and her enforcer Lotto, played by Benicio del Toro, are feeling pressure from a mysterious rival called El Azul. So the Baja cartel makes Ben and Jon an offer they can't refuse, demanding that the boys share their growing techniques and their profits. But actually, the boys do refuse, and they decide to flee the country instead. But before they can get away, the cartel kidnaps O and takes her hostage.
The first act of this is pretty solid. I didn't have any major problems with it. And I feel like the things that come across as silly are intentional in this section. I don't know if you agree.
I think I would. It starts out with this narration. So O is the narrator of the whole movie. She pops back in later, but it's really a big deal in the first act because she tells you who everyone is, who the characters are, what their relationships are. And she starts with a very provocative statement, except it's a little bit soft. What did you make of that?
I think it's another cop-out. This movie is pulling punches left and right for a movie that is explicitly R-rated. Like, it feels like it's not trusting the audience enough with these type of things where she says, I might be dead. It's like, first of all, that's kind of a thing we've heard many times in better movies, so you're not doing yourself any favors. Also, I don't like when a movie has a narrator that it abandons for like large chunks of it, because then it's just like, you didn't know how to catch the audience up to speed without just having somebody tell them. So you're not using a narration where it's actually like adding something to the story. It's just exposition dump, really. You abandon it when we've established this world and these characters, you don't need it anymore. And that makes its absence stand out more.
It's kind of corny. Overall, I decided I was okay with it because I like movies that get started quickly. And in this case, the narration does help you dive into the story, right? You just see images of the guys and she goes, Jon is like this and Ben is like that. And I love them both very much. And you're like, okay, now I know what we're dealing with.
She also, a lot of the dialogue is cut over her having sex with the guys. And she gives one of the worst lines I've ever heard in a movie. When referring to Jon, she says, I have orgasms. He has wargasms. Which I think I had to pause the movie and laugh at that for a good 30 seconds because what the fuck, man? Also, in general, do we think she is meant to be a caricature of like a SoCal socialite slacker? Or does the movie like her and think we're supposed to root for her? I kind of touched on this earlier, but I cannot decide if we're supposed to laugh at her because she says some absurd things and she kind of has a silly accent.
It's definitely one of the big questions of the movie, and it definitely changes how you like the movie because it does set her up to be just the fact that she's telling you the story. You kind of need to trust her and like her. And she's very inoffensive is the word I think I was looking for. She's pleasant to them. All she does is just express her love for them. But yes, she could be kind of sad and funny in that like they decide that their lives are in danger. They can't take this cartel's offer, but they know they're going to kill them if they refuse. So they're going to flee the country. And she's like, okay, I love you guys. I'm going with you, but I need to go shopping. And it's like, oh shit, you just did a like bitches be shopping thing on this girl who's supposed to be one of the heroes of the movie. It can feel pretty cheap.
Like right off the bat, I don't like Blake Lively's performance in this movie. And I'll be honest, there's not a lot of movies that I watch with Blake Lively and I'm like, you know who was the star of this movie? Blake Lively really shined. I don't think she's the most talented actor, but I don't think she's bad in the way she's bad in this. But I wonder if she was directed to kind of try to sound vapid and leave weird gaps in her sentences. And it's hard to tell what's her choices and what she's being told to do because the character is like you said, she's kind of an empty vessel. All she does is like hang out and be nice to them. She doesn't seem to have much of a viewpoint. And even when she gets this big scene with Hayek later in the movie, and you think maybe they're going to connect on like some deeper level. And she's just like, well, you know, I had a job. I was a host at a restaurant and I didn't like it. I went to community college for a semester. I didn't like it. And I really just wanted to find myself. And that's when I realized that the movie, I think, kind of hates her. Because there's no point where she like really redeems herself from that spot. She never like has a moment of self-awakening or self-actualization where she's like, oh no, like I know what I want to do with my life. No, she just ends up bumming it on the beach with these guys in a different country, but she's still living the same life she was at the beginning of the movie.
Yes, she's pretty thin and she doesn't make a great example for one of the female leads in this movie, especially when you hold her up to Salma Hayek's character, who's at least in her trappings supposed to be an impressive woman, right? She's lost her family. She's been through that hardship. She's shored up her situation to protect the kids that are left and to protect herself and take over this very male-dominated world of the Baja cartel. But all that's surface level too. It's weird because it left me liking the concept, and we'll talk about that in the second act where they spend time together and they start to form a pseudo mother-daughter bond. But it is all kind of thin. I don't know, is that Don Winslow's fault or is that Oliver Stone's fault?
It's been a while since I've read the book. It's a good question. I might have to revisit it and kind of see if it's more fleshed out in there. But yeah, like, it's weird. The movie wants us to almost commend and respect Salma Hayek's character, who is, as we've seen, the head of this horrifically violent organization with just untold murders on their hands. But we're like, well, she's a go-getter. She's a self-starter. It takes a lot, I'm sure, to succeed in this world. Nonetheless, trying to lead this group as a woman, it does cast an impressive shadow.
Yeah.
And she's based on a real person, which is interesting too.
Okay.
But also some of the characters in this movie are real people. Like El Azul was a real cartel figure for many years. He's one of the main characters in Narcos Mexico, which is ostensibly based on a true story with a lot of changes and alterations made. So that throws me for a loop too. That's neither here nor there when talking about the characterization of Ophelia and Elena, but I have weird feelings about movies that mix in real people with fictional people. It's hard to make heads or tails of sometimes.
Let's talk about John Travolta. You mentioned him in your monologue that this was one of his last good performances that we can think of. He's fun in this, right?
Yeah, he's pretty good. He's just playing a shitbag DEA agent who's kind of a fuck up. He's got plenty of money because he's clearly bribing a bunch of drug dealers. He arrives, meeting the boys on some pier in Southern California, and he gets out of his pretty expensive looking Cadillac, looks fairly new. He takes a sip out of a fast food cup and then throws the cup into his car. There's clearly liquid still in this cup.
Yeah.
What is this supposed to tell us about his character? That doesn't feel like a throwaway action. I think we're supposed to surmise something from it. Like he doesn't value money anymore. Like he's going to have to get those seats detailed.
It's a very funny move. I noticed that too. It's actually an In-N-Out cup. So it's like a very SoCal thing. He drove up from San Diego to Laguna to meet the boys, stopped at In-N-Out, finished his burger, gets out of the car and chucks the cup back into his passenger seat through the window. It's hilarious if you notice it. And it did make me wonder, I'm like, was that just John Travolta making a funny, bold choice as an actor and they ran with it? Because it's silly.
Now, here's my thought. We find out that Travolta's character, Dennis, is having a tough time. His wife has cancer and it's apparently pretty advanced. So maybe he's throwing it at the passenger seat because no one has to sit in the passenger seat anymore because my wife's bedridden and she's in the hospital all the time.
Oh.
So I don't need this passenger seat. I can just
that's
put whatever I want on it. I might be overanalyzing this.
Very interesting reading there.
But he's good in this.
But yeah, he's fun. He's a shitbag and he's marginally saved by the fact that he has an ailing wife. She's off screen the entire time. They don't actually dig into it. It's just a thing that he acknowledges in every scene. Yeah, my wife, she's dying. And then he goes on to just be a total shithead to everybody on both sides because he ends up, we find out he's working both sides against the middle. But he is fun. The movie is well cast. It's got these guys, got him and Benicio del Toro chewing scenery throughout the middle where even as, like you said, it's kind of workmanlike, just working its way through the story, but it's decorated with good actors doing schlocky characters, which at least keeps you interested and keeps some of the scenes fun.
Yeah, Benicio is absolutely insane in this movie. I don't know if it's a good performance, but it's a very entertaining performance. He's doing this very exaggerated Mexican accent, and he's just the most revolting person in every situation. He says or does the most abhorrent thing in every situation.
He gets close-ups where he's just bugging for the camera, and he's obviously so good at being able to do that stuff. But like you said, it's not a deep performance. There's only one scene where I went, whoa, that was fucked up. Mostly you just go, ha ha. I was going to call him a mustache twirling villain. And one scene, he literally twirls his mustache, but it's actually the one where he's feeling sheepish and apologizing to Elena. But he has a lot of mannerisms. He's trying out a bunch of physicality, doing weird gestures. He's doing weird expressions.
He shows up to home invasions in a landscaping truck.
Yes.
He's got a whole routine. He's a character. As Harvey Keitel famously said, just because you are a character doesn't mean you have character.
There's something that I did want to give the movie credit for, or the screenwriting at least. Elena has this one line where she ends up characterizing the two guys based on bold statements each of them made in the first meeting with her enforcer, Alex. So she gives them these nicknames, Ben and Sean.
It was shit caviar, is what she keeps calling Sean, because he says, you're feeding us shit and want us to call it caviar, is what he tells Alex when he turns down the offer. And that one line clearly got under her skin because she doesn't let it go for the entire movie. Every time they're talking to each other, that's what she calls him.
But yeah, it turns into, she kind of bastardizes the phrase in a weird way. I don't want to hear eat shit caviar. And he never said eat shit caviar. That was just a funny way. It felt really real the way that little bit of phraseology got condensed in this character's vocabulary. So some of the things, like we said, are kind of surface and rote in this movie. And some of them are actually, I had to chalk up little points for the screenwriting.
Yeah. And another thing along those lines that you brought up is how both groups, the SoCal Laguna Beach slackers and the cartel guys, keep calling the other ones savages at various points based on their lifestyle and how they kind of do business, which is just, it's not the most advanced screenwriting, they see each other as savages because they have different cultures, but it's at least something. It's a play towards legitimacy.
It's a thing you can go, they're tying in the name of the movie, and there's some dramatic irony that they both have reason to call each other savages.
I did want to shout out that we get our boy Shea Wiggle with a big set piece in this really white house. I thought they went to Miami for this one scene because his whole house is just white marble, and which, spoiler alert, goes really well with the bright red blood that's about to be all over it because he gets shot in the knee by Lotto, just to connect him with El Azul. I guess this is El Azul's lawyer is what we're supposed to surmise, but really I wanted to bring up this scene because it is our justified crossover of the week.
Justified crossover of the week.
Oh shit.
We've got Mr. Shea Wiggum, only in one episode of Justified, but he plays a key part and he's great in it in the final season. So there we go.
Nice.
He had to take a week off with House of Wax, but
I knew that was your boy.
Yo, I love Shea Wiggum. You kidding me? He's great in this. He can play so many different types of dirtbags, but he can only play dirtbags. But he's got range when it comes to playing dirtbags.
He's a treasure of a dirtbag in this one. He's wearing a red headband and he's chopping up sushi when he gets attacked by Lotto. It's very trashy stuff.
That's like an $800 sashimi knife too, I think. So he's clearly been embezzling a little bit or something. He's well compensated, we can surmise.
Yeah.
Is there anything else from this section we had to go over? Or do you want to move on to the middle of the movie where I guess most of the stuff happens?
Yeah, let's hear what happens next.
All right. The cartel boss, Elena, wants Ben and Sean to work for her for a year before she gives Ophelia back to them, but the boys cannot wait that long. With help from their corrupt DEA agent friend Dennis, played by Jon Travolta, the boys cook up a plan to buy O back with cash instead. Sean gets some of his Navy SEAL buddies to help ambush a cartel shipment and steal their money, and with the help of their financial wizard Spin, played by Emil Hirsch, Speed Racer himself, the boys frame Elena's enforcer Alex, making it look like he helped El Azul pull off the heist. So Elena has Lotto torture and burn Alex, and they force Ben to be the one to light the flame. In the middle of this, the guys realize Elena has a young adult daughter, so they give up their plans to buy Ophelia's freedom and decide to get a little more savage. Ben and Sean track down and kidnap Elena's daughter Magdalena and make their own hostage video, demanding Elena meet them for a trade, or else. I am disappointed they didn't have any fun flash animations on their hostage video, though. That was a missed opportunity.
That's true. We didn't mention that the hostage video, when they capture O, starts off very scary. She's tied to a chair in a warehouse, and they're holding up various implements to threaten her with. And then a cartoon version of her face appears, and music starts playing, and her eyes are X'd out. It's like, wah, wah, we gonna kill her. It's real silly, and it's like, whoa, is this a cartel thing that I didn't know about?
My theory is that, like, the Baja cartel was probably sending the Sinaloa cartel so many beheading videos that eventually they were like, they're just not impressed with these anymore. We got to get creative. We have to put some kind of special effects on it. So that's where it became this Cold War of which cartel has the better flash animators. And for somebody like Ben and Sean that aren't really well versed in cartel warfare, probably didn't need it. They would have been scared without it. Maybe more scared if you didn't have it.
Kind of takes the edge off. Seeing a grainy video in a warehouse with all kinds of sharpened implements being pointed at your girlfriend is one thing, but like cartoon face with the tongue sticking out, is that the fate that you feared worse than death for her?
She's going to become a cartoon somehow. This is like Cool World. Oh, no. Funny stuff, though. But no, the boys don't have that in their budget. They need all $13 million. But they can't hire anyone who's well-versed in After Effects to spruce up their video.
It's too bad, but it was spooky. They wear their spooky masks. One of the iconic images of this movie is the boys wearing these, what do you call that? Santa Muerte, which is, I think, Day of the Dead related iconography.
Like the sugar skulls.
Mexican culture. Yeah, it's that kind of thing. And so they wear those. That's their version because they don't have cartoons for their video, but they wear them in this heist that we talked about where they blow up the cartel guys and steal their money. And I thought that's actually one of the cool things of the movie. This is where the genre payoff heats up and you see Navy SEALs detonating explosives and flipping over cars and a lot of gunfighting. And I thought that part was kind of fun.
It was well done. It was pretty riveting action. I did wonder if Peter Berg did some second unit directing for them because it's very Bergy. You know, he's got a hard on for Navy SEAls, but it was well
That's
done.
true.
And the movie needed it by then. These guys have just been getting beat up on for the entire movie, and to finally get a little bit of comeuppance was good and necessary for pacing reasons, I think, to show that they're a formidable crew.
And like we said, Ben has this arc. He's the character that actually has an arc, and this is where he's in the shit. He's always avoided the violence. He's left it all to Chon, and now he's on the mission with Chon and his Navy SEAL boys, and he's freaking out. He's super nervous, and he plays it real, and then he has to step up during the mission and actually shoot somebody, and then afterwards he barfs in the bushes. And so to me, that was some good drama. I thought, okay, it's not just glorified violence. There's a character who we relate to who's totally losing his shit in the midst of it.
Like you said, he does get a journey for his character, but what is the movie trying to tell us? That this was a necessary and good journey for him to go on?
It kind of, ends up saying, it's a good thing he made it through that and became a savage.
Thank God he killed these people. Especially, I don't want to call Alex innocent, but he ends up murdering a guy who at least wasn't doing what he was accused of doing. He's certainly done plenty of other stuff to deserve some form of retribution, but maybe not what he gets, which is extremely brutal. This whole scene it goes on quite a while of Alex being kind of strung from the ceiling and tortured. His eyeball is hanging out for a majority of it, which freaked me the fuck out. I can't deal with eyeball stuff.
That was tough to watch because Lotto was whipping him. Apparently that's how his eyeball came out, because he whipped it out of his face. And it's the real brutal, like, cartel stuff where I guess if you're into that, you're like, I need to see that in its full brutality. And this is Demian Bashir, who's quite a good actor. And so he invests the pain of this character pretty good. He's begging Elena for his life, and it's brutal.
Bashir is a great actor, and I almost feel like he's too good of an actor for how small his role is in this. But then when you see this scene, you're like, you really did need somebody with some legit chops to to pull off the kind of the agony and the anguish, because he mentions while he's being tortured, they threaten his family too. So he eventually admits to doing it. So even though he's clearly innocent of this, I don't want to, when I say he's innocent, please be aware, I'm only saying of this one specific thing they've accused him of.
He didn't do this.
Did plenty of other stuff though. But so one of the first notes I took when I sat down to watch this movie, I think before even O's narration starts, I think it was literally like seeing the studio stuff. I said, so Oliver Stone directing a movie about weed. I can't wait to see what boomer ass shit he comes up with about marijuana. And lo and behold, we get it in this section. We get some real boomer takes about weed. Ophelia asks Elena for something to take the edge off while she's imprisoned. And you were the one who took the note. I want you to get some of the credit here. But what does Elena say? She goes,
no, but
you mean to tell me you're using or something like that?
You nailed it. Because I couldn't actually make sense of it the first time I watched. I'm like, wait a minute. What was she addicted to? Because there are all these nods. She's like, oh yeah, I've been using since I was in 8th grade. And now that I'm locked up and you're holding me hostage, I haven't had a fix. She doesn't actually say I haven't got a fix, but there's all this stuff that expresses like she's going through withdrawal from a drug that she was addicted to and she's falling apart. And I'm like, wait a minute, they're not talking about weed. She's literally
but they are
going through drug withdrawal from weed. She's doing everything except scratching her neck and forearms. She's like fully jonesing. And then at one point they play it up where she's like in a real bad state where her eyes are just glazed. She's like, oh, I haven't had weed in weeks. And Otto lights up a joint and puffs it in her face to make it terrible for her. It's kind of silly. I was like, are they really talking about weed? But they were.
I smoke my fair share of marijuana, believe me. But there are times when I go weeks without smoking and it's not like sitting in the corner shaking. Maybe you have a slightly harder time falling asleep one night, but like by day 3, you're back to normal. It's not a big deal. Like when I went to Texas for a week, I didn't bring any weed with me because I'm not fucking flying on a plane with weed. You know what? It's fine. It's not that bad. Ophelia, get it together, pal.
That was a funny twist.
Pretty funny, but I called it from the beginning. I was like, there's no way Oliver Stone is going to have normal ideas about marijuana and its effect on people in this movie. It just makes no sense.
You were so right.
All of this being about marijuana just kind of feels strange in and of itself because like we usually think of it as like the harmless drug. And that's not to say that there has not been cartel activity around marijuana. I know the original book was written about the marijuana trade, and the Mexican cartels have a big stake in marijuana. The first couple seasons of Narcos Mexico are mostly about marijuana. But like the resources they're devoting to this little weed business seems out of proportion to the actual profits they would stand to gain. Yeah. All right. You want to walk us through the end? There's not a ton to cover in this last section. It's pretty cut and dry. Just make some narrative choices we're going to have to talk about.
Here we go. Let's bring it home. In a remote field, Ben and Jon face off with Elena and Lotto for a hostage trade of Magdalena for Ophelia. Both sides have brought snipers, and a massive firefight breaks out, and all of our heroes and all the villains die in a blaze of glory. Except they didn't. That was just a daydream that Ophelia had. In reality, Lotto scurries away just as the DEA swoops in and arrests Elena. Ben and Jon are let off thanks to the testimony of Agent Dennis, and our favorite throuple finally get to escape and start a new life on a beach in Indonesia.
This is a strange choice to end a movie, but we have to get there first. Let's talk about the whole kidnapping Magdalena plot. You called this out. How quickly Elena just is willing to roll over and show her belly as soon as they have her daughter. She's just giving up on the whole plot to get them to work with her at all. She'll give O back. They don't have to work with her at all. They could do whatever they want. And they did set that up a little bit because she gives some long speeches about how she's lost so much of her family and she's doing whatever she has to protect what she has left.
Yeah, she's partially estranged from this daughter, and we see throughout the movie she's trying to reconnect with her, and she goes through all this effort, and the daughter's pretty much rejecting her. But as soon as they take the daughter, I'm like, Elena's still a tough cartel boss. She's been through the shit. She knew that everyone around her is in jeopardy for their life at all times. But as soon as she sees the daughter, she's like on her knees and crying, no, I'll do whatever you say. And I'm like, wait, is she fucking with them? Because I would think that she would at least play some kind of tough angle. She still has Ophelia standing right next to her. Like there's some mutually assured destruction that could happen. So it just caught me by surprise. I'm like, is she really that broken that fast? But then of course she tells everyone to leave the room, and in private she breaks down even more. Salma Hayek gives a very nice performance. And so, okay, I'm convinced she's really broken. That was it. She could stand a lot of shit, but she could not stand seeing her daughter in a freezer.
Yeah, in both versions of the ending, she literally just goes to the handoff point and hands Ophelia over in exchange for her daughter. No tricks, no games. She doesn't try to pull a fast one on anyone. Right. I was kept waiting for there to be some other angle because unless she's planning to immediately disappear and retire from the drug game, you've just now revealed to all of your enemies and rivals, which seems to be a growing list, that all they have to do is threaten your daughter and you'll do whatever they want, which they talk a lot about in these movies. It's all about if we let these people get away with it, everybody's going to know that we're weak and they can do whatever they want to us. So we have to retaliate hard. hard. But no, and I totally get it. That's your last remaining child you're going to be, but she's got to just get out of the game now, right? There's really no coming back from that if she lives.
No, and she gets out of the game in 2 different ways in the ending.
Yeah, let's talk about this stupid ass shit.
There's before they get to the stupid ass shit, there's one other scene that gets thrown in there. Before they go to the meeting place, Lotto pulls Ophelia aside and shows her a video on his phone and reveals that he raped her. And what we deduce from her reaction is she didn't know it. She was drugged at the time, and it's fucking awful.
There is a scene where he gives her a drink with something in it earlier on when she's activity where they don't show anything, so you kind of forget about it until this moment. But yeah, it's incredibly horrible. It is a very upsetting scene, and I'm not really sure where it fits in like the larger narrative.
Yeah, you end up going, what the fuck was the point of that? Now, it's a great performance. We talked about how cheesy that Benicio was in parts of this movie. He's actually the scary, fucked up dude in this scene. This is where he's like, okay, you gave me some real shit to act. I'm going to fucking act it. And you're like, oh, fuck this guy. He's awful. And he does it perfectly. Like you go, okay, I wish they hadn't shown me that, but he really played that part really well. But like you said, kind of nothing happens. He pretty much waltzes out of the movie after that point. And you have a theory about how that could have made more sense if they would have made a different choice. But this is the weird feeling we have leading into this final sequence.
Right. And then we get to the final sequence where everything seems backwards to me. So the fantasy ending, what doesn't really happen, is the fucked up one where everybody dies. And the actual ending is the happy one where only the bad guys die. I guess Lotto gets away, but the throuple escape to Indonesia. They actually went to Indonesia to film this very short sequence of them on the beach. And they also do swim through a waterfall at some point. So to me, that's a very strange choice for a movie with this kind of tone and this worldview. It would have made so much more sense to have them on the beach in Indonesia be the daydream and then have the actual ending be this handoff goes wrong. Everyone double crosses everybody. Everyone ends up dead. And especially, and you pointed this out, because in that fucked up version of the ending where everybody dies, Ophelia is the one who shoots Lotto and kills him, which feels like a natural progression for her character becoming a savage like everyone else. She's been relatively innocent throughout all this, but she finally snaps and turns on the man who raped her and tortured her with the evidence of it. A grand statement about the fact that nobody gets out of the drug game without sacrificing their soul and their humanity to some degree. But no, like Lotto just gets away with it in the real version of the ending, and Ophelia gets no retribution. And she seems pretty much fine when they're in Indonesia. I don't know. It's kind of a hollow ending to me.
And I guess you could say, there's some dramatic irony in that the worst guy gets away and becomes the head of his own cartel because the semi-good cartel head, Elena's the one who goes to jail and faces all the consequences. But yeah, it would have made so much more sense because we talk about the progression. The 3 of them, they're co-leads in a certain sense. Sean comes into the movie, he's already damaged. He's already resorts to violence as his first and only solution to problems. So he's already a savage. Ben thinks he's not a savage. He's kept himself out of this, but the movie slowly drags him down. He has to kill people in pulling off the heist, and then he has to be the one to torch the guy that he framed in the Alex torture scene. So, okay, now Ben's a savage. And then finally in this final scene, they could have said, you know what? It even got Ophelia. We thought she was just a light, fluffy character who was never going to get dragged into the seriousness of all this. But look, it got her too. She's a savage at the end. But no, they erased that the fluffiest, silliest kind of way.
I was already lukewarm on the movie, and then this ending just tipped me into the firmly dislike this movie game. It was never a movie I was going to love, but by the time we got to this ending that feels like a real cop-out and a real failure of imagination by everyone involved, I said, yeah, fuck this movie.
It's a real pull the rug kind of situation because it's trying to do Shakespearean tragedy for a minute, right? It's like the 3 lovers are there and they actually take these double doses of morphine so that they all die together, even though 2 of the 3 of them are mortally wounded. So it's got this Romeo and Juliet kind of tragic ending. And then it goes, but that's not what really happened. And it actually makes not a record scratch noise, but like a videotape rewind noise. And then some funny ELO song comes on. And then now it's like comic relief. And it's like, whoa, that's a big rug to pull.
And it just feels at odds with the tone of the movie they've established. And that's how the movie ends. It leaves a bad taste in your mouth. Whatever goodwill you'd built up to this. I think most people really hated this ending. The few reviews that I read, we are not alone in thinking it undermines everything else that came before it.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't taking the movie that seriously, so I didn't feel like I was betrayed. Maybe it's me, I'm a softie. I didn't really want to see a tragic ending where they're all dead. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm happier when a movie ends and people are frolicking on a beach. But it did make me think the movie was pretty frivolous and silly.
And that, to be clear, the fantasy ending, quote unquote, the one where they all die at this handoff, is the ending of the book. That is the true ending of Don Winslow's book.
Oh.
I remember at least that much, that none of them live. And he was involved in writing the screenplay, I know. I wonder if he suggested this change or if he found out about this on the premiere night. Something tells me, knowing Don Winslow, he would not have suggested this change. His endings tend to be more bitter than sweet.
It feels like the biggest studio note ever. Like, back the tape up and give us a happy ending. It's pretty strange.
And it feels distinctly not Stonian either. Like, it doesn't feel like an Oliver Stone move either.
Yeah.
All right, that was Savages. So let's check in on what the key players from Savages went on to do, see how their careers are going. Obviously, we've talked quite a bit about Taylor Kitsch, but it never hurts to check in on everybody and see what they're up to.
Yeah, of course.
I'm going to start with the man, Oliver Stone. I thought this was interesting. In my research, I discovered that he has made exactly one movie since 1994 that has at least doubled its budget.
Wow.
That was 2006's World Trade Center. And of course, 1994 is when Natural Born Killers came out, which was a big hit for him. But these are the movies he's made besides World Trade Center since 94. Nixon, U-Turn, Any Given Sunday, Alexander, W, Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps, Savages, and Snowden. So all of those were at least box office disappointments. Most were just bombs. Like, some of those did really bad. Like, Alexander is one of the biggest bombs of all time. We'll have to talk about that in depth one day. So his last feature film was Snowden from 2016. That was the Joseph Gordon-Levitt biopic, I guess you'd call it, about Edward Snowden.
Yeah.
Which wasn't bad. I thought it was okay. It was an interesting story, at least. When you're interested in the subject matter, you tend to give him a little more leeway.
Yeah.
And he's made some documentaries since then. He's done the Putin interviews, Revealing Ukraine, and JFK Revisited Through the Looking Glass, and Nuclear. I haven't seen any of those. I probably won't. But he did recently announce his next film. He's working on a film with Benicio del Toro called White Lies.
Oh.
So it seems like they've got a good actor-director relationship going. All it is announced so far, so we don't know much about it. But it was added like very recently. I think when I was making my little one sheet of information, it wasn't on his IMDb like 2 weeks ago, and now it is. So
well, look at that. It's coming back around. But it is interesting, like you said, most of those movies, Any Given Sunday has cultural relevance.
Yes.
I'm actually surprised to know that didn't turn any kind of profit. But
that gets me excited that we could talk about it, though.
Yeah.
That movie's bonkers. So that'll be a fun episode one day.
Yeah, but that's a long stretch.
Yeah.
We're talking 30 years here.
He has not been commercially successful in a long time, and I don't think he's going to snap out of it anytime soon. His movies don't have much mass appeal anymore.
That's wild. I would just say he came close with Savages, though. We should point out that it wasn't like a super bomb. It was just like it didn't get there, but it did bring in some box office.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't a huge loss. We really included Savages because, you know, it was kind of the Taylor Kitsch trilogy. It's how we started our podcast with him, and Battleship was a big early episode for us. So we felt inclined to include it. It probably lost less than $10 million. So it's not a huge bomb, but definitely a disappointment. And that's how a lot of Stone stuff seemed in the past couple decades. Didn't quite double it, but was close.
I wonder if he thought, we talked about how much this movie seemed a little bit formulaic, not totally his whole thing, like he was just trying to execute a story that he got hold of. And I wonder if he thought he was like, oh, let me make one for them and this will actually make money and then I'll get to do my stuff again. But it didn't quite even get there.
Yeah, this definitely has a feeling of a one for them from Stone's point of view. But even like it being a one for them, it's still like weird because he's incapable of just making a straightforward film in a lot of ways. He also co-wrote the script. It was him, Don Winslow worked on the script, and Shane Salerno. Salerno's a longtime film and TV writer. He did a lot of NYPD Blue. Did the film Breakdown, which I quite enjoy, if you remember that one. It's a Kurt Russell movie. Armageddon, all the Alien vs. Predator movies. So now we're moving into some schlocky territory. Sure. And Ghost Rider. But he's also a writer on all the Avatar sequels.
Okay.
So he's staying busy with those. And he's attached to adapt another Don Winslow book, The Cartel, which is a book I read and enjoyed. I think I might have recommended it to you not too long ago.
Yeah, so we do a lot of projection on this podcast. Just knowing that, I gave Salerno credit for all the good stuff in the script, and then I pooped on the other guys when I didn't like something.
Fair. All right. That could be. He got some good writing credits, but he's got some crap on there too. Winslow, we know, we talked to him a little bit, but he's actually retired now. He retired in April 2022 to focus on political activism. He's very active on Twitter, as we know, sometimes with not super great takes, but he's left leaning, but he can sometimes be a little tone deaf, I would say.
He's interesting. He's one of those loud, shouty, liberal anti-Trump accounts. And sometimes those are useful, but they're never terribly insightful and they get noisy and kind of like, okay, Pops, we get it.
He did write a new trilogy of books. City of Fire is a book just came out in 2022 about an Italian mob feud in Providence, Rhode Island during the 80s and 90s. Very interested to read about that. So I'll pick that up. And he's apparently, I think he's already written the 2 sequels to it, but it's going to be his trilogy. So he's retired in the sense that he'll be putting out books for a couple more years, but they're already written.
That sounds right up your alley, like the show you keep telling me about.
Brotherhood, yeah, great show. And I'm only like an hour from Providence. I like to go check it out once in a while.
Nice.
Good Italian food. So and it's got a very interesting history. I read, there was a podcast about the corrupt mayor of Providence in the 80s. That was very interesting. The name escapes me right now. If I can find it, I'll put it in the show notes.
Nice.
So let's talk about our boy Taylor, the number one Blasty boy, this patron saint of Blast Zone. As much as he's been featured on this podcast, we tend to like him, right?
And I liked him in this. It's a cheesy part, but even going back on multiple watches and knowing the movie sags under the weight of its own story sometimes, and the characters are a little bit coarsely drawn, but like he's the right guy for this role, and he plays this role effectively, where it's like he's kind of an annoying dick and he's belligerent and all the things that this character is, but you're like, yeah, buy it, because Taylor he's doing it. He only recently showed a warmer side to us in the Terminal List, right? Where we were like, oh, our guy now gets to be like the warm, likable guy instead of the asshole.
He played both sides of that coin very effectively in Friday Night Lights. I hate to keep bringing that up.
Oh, yes, of course. My blind spot.
It was like a 5-season show, and he played a lot of different shades of this character, Tim Riggins. So that kind of enlightened me on his range as an actor. But yeah, since then, he has not gotten as many chances to show it.
Yeah.
So it was nice seeing him in the Terminal List, even though I made a prediction about his character in the Terminal List like a year before it came out and was correct, which just seems like formulaic writing on the part of the screenplay. But is it getting another season?
Oh, I heard that, but it didn't make sense based on how it ended. But sure,
it was a big hit, so I think they're going to try some way.
Yeah.
But he was in the Terminal List. Seems like a big hit for Amazon. He's going to be in Painkiller, which is a mini series about the opioid epidemic coming to Netflix. Before you get too excited, the whole thing is directed by Peter Berg.
Okay, is it about Navy SEALs who blow up the opioid epidemic?
You know what? I bet at least one of the characters, and probably Taylor Kitsch's character, is going to be somebody who comes home and develops an opioid addiction because of the injury he sustained in the war. That just seems like a very Bergy plot line.
That's a very solid bet you're placing right there.
So the release date just says 2022, but it's November and they don't have a solid date yet. So I'm guessing we're looking at early 2023 as a best case scenario. But also some exciting news. He's the star, writer, and director of an upcoming crime drama film called Pieces about a group of friends that intercept a drug run, I think in Detroit. And I really hope it happens, but it's only been announced so far. So, it's precarious. But that sounds rad. I would check it out.
I'm really interested to see what he brings when he's holding all the reins to a project.
He seems like an artsier, more thoughtful guy than he's kind of been allowed to be in the roles he's portrayed. If you read interviews or see him, sometimes that could be a little bit of a recipe for disaster if he gets up his own ass too far. Like, I'm finally going to show the world the real me, but it could also be really great. So I'll definitely give it a chance.
It'll be fun.
So Aaron Taylor Johnson, the other half of the Cheech and Chong duo, he's been very busy. He's pretty much a constantly working actor. He followed this up with Anna Karenina, Kick-Ass 2, which is just a hilarious double feature. And then he joined the MCU as Pietro Maximoff, aka Quicksilver, in Captain America: The Winter Soldier. He reprised that in Avengers: Age of Ultron. He was pretty bad. He tried to do like a Russian accent. It was pretty embarrassing.
He wasn't the good Quicksilver. Everybody likes our
Evan
guy,
Peters.
Evan Peters.
And he came back as Wanda's brother Quicksilver in WandaVision, which was funny because then they kind of played with the different realities, alternate dimension stuff with that. But I like Aaron Taylor Johnson, but I like Evan Peters more. Aaron Taylor Johnson also British. I feel like he never plays British characters. Did you know that?
Yes, I didn't know. I just read that today and I'm like, what the heck? Because I think I met him in Kick-Ass and I would have never guessed.
Same. Yeah. He was in the very good 2015 Godzilla. I ride for that movie all the time. Okay. Really enjoy it. But he didn't have much to do in it. And then he stole the movie in Nocturnal Animals. I talked about this just a couple weeks ago when we were talking about Tom Ford. He's great in Nocturnal Animals, but that movie's a tough hang. So I don't blame anyone for avoiding it. He starred as James Frey in his wife, Sam Taylor Johnson's adaptation of A Million Little Pieces, which I don't know if you remember the controversy around that memoir. It was widely debunked.
That was the Oprah Book Club special that went sour.
That guy. Yeah. And weirdly, the movie was made like several years after the story was found to be largely fabricated, but they still made a faithful adaptation of the book, which feels kind of weird. Yeah.
I guess if it's a good fictional story, you could make that movie as a work of fiction, but it is weird if everyone who knew it was had by the author in the first place.
Right. There's a lot of baggage attached to that whole story and situation. And then he was in Tenet, The Kingsman, Bullet Train. He was one of the better parts of Bullet Train that I saw as Tangerine, the hitman duo with Brian Tyree Henry.
Yeah, I like both those guys. I love Brian Tyree Henry. I love their whole triple name aesthetic that they both got going on. And
I didn't even notice.
I could not hang with them in that movie.
Same syllables and everything.
Yeah, it's like a
6 syllables in each name.
got a mirror thing going on.
He'll also star as Kraven the Hunter in future Blast Zone episode, Kraven the Hunter.
Oh, no.
Which we talked about.
That's bombed already?
It's bombed already, I decided. Sorry, guys. So Blake Lively's been pickier with her roles of late.
Okay.
She's only been in 6 movies since 2012, but she's also had 3 kids since then and is expecting a 4th. So that's a big investment of your time. She was in The Shallows, which I really liked. And she was in 2018's black comedy thriller, A Simple Favor, which was surprisingly awesome.
Okay.
And a sequel to that is planned. That was the Anna Kendrick and Henry Golding mystery. It's worth checking out if you haven't seen it. It's a fun time.
Yeah, that sounds like one I'd like. I have to put that on my list.
Jon Travolta's been busy, but not necessarily anything good. I wonder, is he having like tax trouble? Because this motherfucker
Probably.
stays working for just the absolute worst movies you've ever heard of. Probably In a Valley of Violence is his other best movie performance. I know you checked it out and weren't a big fan. That's the Ty West Western with James Ransome and Ethan Hawke.
Yes.
Which I didn't mind, but I understand why you wouldn't have liked it. His most acclaimed role in the past 20 years easily is Robert Shapiro in The People versus O.J. Simpson, which was a good show.
Yeah.
That he was very good in because he's playing a sleazebag. That's kind of his wheelhouse now.
As long as he's willing to do that, he has a shot at being successful.
I don't think I need to catch people up on Benicio del Toro because he's in fucking everything. But I did want to bring up one thing I'm really sad about. I would say he's playing, but he already played. This movie's in the can. It's been done for years, I think. He played Dr. Phil in the Jamie Foxx directed film about NBA All-Star Weekend called fittingly All-Star Weekend.
Okay.
But the movie is indefinitely shelved for some reason, which is a fucking bummer because that sounds insane and I want to see it so bad.
Just, release the Dr. Phil clips. Benicio as Dr. Phil. I got to see that. That is
Give
wild.
me something. Yeah, give me something. But, he's in a lot of franchises and big budget movies. I did want to shout out if anybody's looking for a really good, really interesting Benicio performance to check out the Showtime series Escape at Dannemora, which was about that highly publicized prison breakout where the 2 escapees had an affair with a prison employee and she helped them escape and was on the run with them for a short time.
Yes. Crazy story.
Crazy story. And the show is phenomenal. And I don't think it got the respect it deserved. Paul Dano. It was Patricia Arquette. And
Oh, yeah. She was super cool. And I think I saw like a few episodes and then I stopped, but not because I didn't think it was awesome. I just somehow got distracted from it and forgot to go back.
Yeah, it's a little slow, but it's really good and well made. I think Ben Stiller had a big hand in the creation of it and maybe the directing of it, which is cool to see. But yeah, Escape at Dannemora fucking rules. So check that out if you guys are looking for a good watch. Salma Hayek, also busy as hell. She joined the MCU with Eternals.
Right.
She's been in the Hitman Bodyguard movies. She was in House of Gucci, and she'll be in Magic Mike's Last Dance coming soon.
Oh, cool.
I think Channing is directing that one too.
Oh, good. Now we'll get to see his artistic side come out.
Oh no, my boy Stevie's back for that. Steven Soderbergh, he's coming
Oh,
back.
I forgot he was Magic Mike. He wasn't Magic Mike.
No, he's Magic Steve. He did not direct XXL,
Okay.
which is why I'm shocked to see him coming back, but I guess he wants to wrap up the trilogy. Channing Tatum is a producer on it, so he's highly involved in the
Okay.
getting the movie made. But yeah, him and Salma Hayek are the only 2 cast announced.
It's a promising start.
Yeah.
3 of them hooked up together.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. The Magic Mike movies are, I feel like a lot of men are hesitant to endorse those movies because it's about male strippers and they feel weird. Straight guys just being insecure, but don't let that get in the way of enjoying a well-made film because the Magic Mike movies are great. The first one better than the second.
I didn't see XXL, but I do remember really quite liking the first one.
Yeah, XXL's okay, but it's not as good. But I'm excited now for the third one.
Totally.
That's what I got. Did you have any big thoughts you wanted to sum up the movie with?
No, this is a movie where I'm like, okay, what's my big summation of this? And it's just like, well, that happened. That was as much as I could say about it. It's interesting because it's for both of us, it should hit a lot of our buttons, right? It's got a bunch of actors that we like and respect, and they're doing fun things. It's got a topic that we're both into, cartel crime stuff, and it goes through all the motions. So it's not terrible. If you just want to see some cartel thrilling action, I wouldn't say like avoid it, but it kind of just left me flat.
Yeah, it's a real case of untapped potential, I think. There was a lot of opportunities to do something really interesting with this, especially given the unique setup and relationship between the 3 main characters. But the movie tends to pull its punches in a lot of ways, particularly with the ending. It ends on such a bad note that it's kind of hard to come back from that. Because every time I think about this movie, I think about how cheated I felt at the end of it. And I'm not a person that often says like, oh, the ending ruined the movie. I think movies are typically about the journey, but the ending kind of undermines everything we learned, or the message we should have taken away from it. So it really did leave me cold in the long run, unfortunately.
Yeah. As often happens, like you gave us a roadmap for how they could have made it better. Just swap the real and the dream versions, and there's so much more meaning in the movie.
I promise you that was not a hard thing to come up with. I didn't sit there and rack my brain. I'm like, just switch them. Just switch them. Makes so much more sense. It's just got a better thematic through line that way. But
yeah.
What do I know? So it's been a grim 5 weeks between Blasttober and Savages. Has some horrifying moments in it. So for the schedule, we're going to switch it up a little bit. Next week, we're doing a comedy.
Oh.
And we're doing, to coincide with a man who's getting a lot of Oscar buzz lately for his performance in Darren Aronofsky's upcoming The Whale, we're going to do a Brendan Fraser comedy from the 90s. We're doing AIRHEADS.
Wow.
Nice heavy metal film with a great supporting cast. Michael McKean in a big role, of course, early Adam Sandler performance, Steve Buscemi. I'm pretty excited to get in there and revisit it because it's one of those movies I watched a million times as a kid, but have not seen in probably 20 years, if not more.
This is cool. I was looking back on the schedule to see, okay, when was the last comedy we did? And that might have been Empire Records. And they almost feel like of a piece, like music-themed comedies of the 90s.
Yeah, I remember liking this more than Empire Records, but again, I was a child, so who knows? It was definitely not well reviewed, but I think it has a big cult fan base now, so it'll be cool to check it out and see. It might suck. I don't know, but it can't be the worst Adam Sandler movie we've ever done.
No, absolutely not. We have nowhere to go but up for Sandler.
Yeah, and talking about That's My Boy for everyone who's confused. Episode 18, I think? 19? One of those.
Episode 20, That's My Boy. Sean Anders film shot by Brandon Trost.
Be careful, you guys. Netflix is out there suggesting that movie to people. Don't fall for it, or at least know what you're getting into.
All right, that was Savages. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe to the pod. You can follow us on Twitter for the time being at BlastZonePod. Shoot us an email, blastzonepod@gmail.com. Any suggestions, feedback, questions you have for us, we would always love hearing from you.
We do.
And we'll see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.
The Blast Zone.